Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of I Like to Read with me, your host, Rachel Polanski. We have a little pirate mascot for the viewers watching at home. My cat, Willoughby, is in a pirate costume. He also had a hat. Wasn't into that, but surprisingly, we're about half an hour, 40 minutes into wearing the pirate costume, and he doesn't hate it so far. We also got him a pirate ship scratcher, which is approximately 4 feet long. No, I don't know. I'm not good with measurements or math, but it's quite a large scratcher. Was it for him or for me? Really more for me and my boyfriend. We're both in a very pirate mood recently. Ordered myself a pirate costume as well, just for fun. Is it for Halloween? Is Halloween even happening? I don't really know, but why not? So anyways, how's everybody doing? I just wanted to touch briefly on something from the last episode. So if you watched the last episode, particularly the visual component of it, I was debating whether or not to even put it up, just due to the fact that I was not really happy with how I looked in the video. I've struggled for a long time with body image issues, surprise, surprise, another millennial girl, woman has issues with her body. In the past, 6-ish months, 4 to 5, really just kind of starting in quarantine, I've begun to work out a lot more, pay attention, ironically, to moving more, even though I'm, I'm not going into work. I'm just moving from my bed to the couch. But I've been doing, just a quick little 20-minute cardio dance video, or I'm lucky enough to have a beautiful city park hiking trail of Los Angeles right near my house that I go to quite a bit. So I've just been feeling more confident in terms of, how I feel. It's not so much about how I look. So back to all that, I liked what I said, so I didn't want to re-record the episode. I also, I didn't feel fat or feel gross. I just know that looking at it immediately, my thought was like, oh my gosh, do I really look like that? And I know that there's also, a combination of angles and the way that, you look is not necessarily how you actually look, and the camera adds 10 pounds and all that jazz. And bottom line is, I didn't want to not post it just because I didn't love how I looked in it. I was debating, just posting the audio file. Boyfriend said that would be weird for consistency, so we put them both up. And I think it's important to know that I am not, I'm not always feeling 100% in my body. It's a constant up and down sort of thing, but I'm definitely way happier and way better than I was. But that doesn't mean that it's an easy battle and that it's fixed in one day. And I don't, this isn't a body positivity podcast, and I don't want to get too much more into it, because you're here hopefully for reading and books. But I did just want to touch on that to know that, I'm a person too, and we all have struggles, and we all, we all aren't perfect. Nobody's perfect. But I wanted to make sure, I don't think anybody's trolling me. I don't think anybody's writing anything mean, or probably most people didn't even notice anything or think about it. But it's really about myself, and I really don't care. I mean, it's easy to say I don't care what other people think. Of course I do to an extent, but it's really, like I said, about how I feel and about how I look. And if I don't feel happy with it, that's what's important. If somebody else doesn't, that's their problem, not my problem. Anyways, we're going to get into this week's 5 books. I also just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody who's been listening so far, who's been here along for the ride. I know those first couple episodes were really rough. I was holding the microphone up to my face just like this. I said a lot, probably still will, but I'm just going to I think the biggest problem of that is I don't always think before I speak. Surprise, surprise. And I'm just so ready to get those words out without even thinking about it. I don't want to say that, I sometimes have a tendency to repeat words, especially if I'm not thinking about it. I do plan the books ahead of time, of course. Now we've learned that I should keep the books up, because I don't always remember the minute details, such as names and settings. But we're learning, like I said. So first book that we're going to talk about is called Too Much: How Victorian Constraints Still Bind Women Today by Rachel Vorona Cote. This book is amazing. It is the perfect mix of like memoir, personal anecdotes combined with research and looking into a specific topic through a sociocultural lens and then applying it to problems in today's society. So as the title says, too much, Rachel, her name's Rachel, she explores the ideals of Victorian society, how women were constantly told that they were too fat or too loud or too much, and the corset is such a metaphor for kind of holding you in and constraining, or how women are constrained. So she looks into the constraints that happened in the Victorian era, certain elements of their culture and society that are still permeating in today's society. So she kind of, each chapter explores an aspect of that too muchness while also, exploring her own too muchness and how that has been an ongoing issue, quote unquote, or element of her life. She talks about pop culture issues like the Babysitter's Club, which, by the way, amazingly well done adaptation on Netflix. Even if the books were not as iconic a part of your childhood as they were for me, I highly recommend checking that out. So, goddamn, I need to plan this better. I do have a couple excerpts on my phone of pictures I took from my Kindle that I just loved so much. There was a particular line about the Babysitter's Club and about sort of like how everybody just, even if your life was perfect, which, growing up, mine definitely wasn't. I'm sure most kids weren't. You always just, like, wanted that yearning for another life and to just, like, easily place yourself into someone else's life, whether they were fictional or a real person. But alas, I am filming on my phone right now. Excuse me. It's going to be way too complicated to, like, get up and grab all that. So maybe we'll throw that in the comments. Maybe next episode we'll think about, having those pictures and excerpts ready on my computer. But that's not going to happen this time, so that's something to look forward to, another learning curve. This book is particular, I could look back and think, wow, this book was so formative because, I read this, I ended up following the author Rachel on Twitter, and then lo and behold, she posted that she's going to be teaching a nonfiction writing class, specifically kind of focusing on everything that she learned while writing her book. I admire her writing style so much. Like, it's totally the kind of writing that I aspire to do. I've been toying with the idea for quite a long time of exploring the VH1 of love reality shows, like Rock of Love, Flavor of Love, especially like the lesser known spin-offs from that. Daisy of Love, I Love New York is probably one of the most famous. I Love New York, Real Chance of Love. When I watched those last year, they're from like the mid 2000s. They really just inspired and really made me feel something in a way that pretty much no other media has, at least in a very long time. And I know that sounds absurd, but like, why? And why were they so important? And why is looking at this piece of culture from 15 years ago still so important to today's culture and what it says about reality TV and women? So like, I have a lot of ideas. Like I said, I've been toying with it for over a year, which is around when I rewatched or watched the majority of these shows. I just don't really know where to go with them. Like, a lot of my writing is either more creative, prosaic, or like, reviewy for my blog, but it's not the sort of like large scale think piece. By no means am I like in any position to write a book or like anything insane, but I think just like a fun article within the course of the 6 weeks of the class. I definitely don't expect to like have anything fully done and ready to share, but I think to begin from an idea and at least have like a much better idea of where I'm going with it and where I want to go with it. It'll also be great just to interact and get advice with and learn from somebody who I actually have read their work and really just like want to emulate, like I said, I admire her. Hopefully she can be a bit of a mentor. So when this episode is out, I will have already been in part of the class. The class will be in session at the time of recording. It's right before the class is about to start. So I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling inspired. I graduated college over 4 years ago at this point. So like I said, I've been doing my own personal creative stuff but I miss just writing, and I miss that sort of sociocultural explorations that I was able to bring to some of my academic pieces with a heavy emphasis on academic. Of course, it was for college, so to now have the more sort of like personable, palatable style. Hopefully that will translate to a wonderful piece on something about the VH1 Rock of Love shows. So in case you missed it, book 1 is Too Much: How Victorian Constraints Still Bind Women Today. This is for anybody who is interested in sociocultural anthropological studies. If you're interested in the Victorian era, if you're interested in Britney Spears, there's like a whole thing about the Britney Spears mental health conspiracy, which is fully rampant on Instagram still. Fully convinced that Britney Spears is being held a prisoner in her own mind and body. It's a beach read. It's light while still feeling like, wow, I really, like, you learn stuff from it. It has the elements of a memoir personal story. If you're not so much into like even though it's academic, it is very, like I said, it's palatable, it's readable, it's accessible. And even if you're not a woman, if you're a man, you can still read it. And I think it also, helped me understand a little bit of the aspects of my too muchness, without tampering them down. Of course, it's not a self-help book or anything. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like this 200 years ago, this is how women acted. And 200 years from then, there's certain things that are still present. So that is number 1. Number 2 is Life Will Be the Death of Me and You Too by Chelsea Handler. I know Chelsea Handler is a little bit of a controversial figure for some things that she says, for her wild radical acceptance of cannabis and certain other drugs. And she's a single woman in her late 40s, which is so taboo in Hollywood. But I think she's a queen. I mean, she came from a large Jewish family. She moved to Los Angeles in her young 20s. She's now in her late 40s. She is insanely successful. She's had her own talk show, TV show. This is like her 5th or 6th book that she's written. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I was actually lucky enough to see a live taping of the Chelsea Handler show on Netflix. Sarah Silverman was a guest. I got to touch Chunk, her dog who passed away, R.I.P. That was just a really cool, I didn't get to meet her, but I got to see her in person. And then was, the first month I moved to LA. So it was a very cool, fun LA experience. But this book is, don't let the fact that she is a comedian or, you might think of her as more of a personality or an actor, but she's an amazing writer. And I know that she does a lot of introspection, a lot of self-work, which is especially what this book deals with. For a long time, Chelsea has been super aware of her privilege and reckoning with it and trying to see, as a wealthy white woman, what she can do to kind of ground herself and make herself, the best version of herself as possible. So this book really deals with her past traumas, particularly the death of her brother when she was younger, which is something that I personally didn't know much about with Chelsea. I know she speaks openly a lot about her family, but this is the first time that she's really spoken about the death of her brother and how, even though that happened when she was 9 years old, looking, almost 40 years later, how those lasting effects have still impacted her and affected her relationships, affected her lack of empathy, just affected so many different things. And she's very candid with her personal journey. There's a personality test that she takes in it, which is super fun, that I'd never heard of. She has a couple of chapters about her dogs and her love of her pets, but the majority of this book is really reckoning with her past self, her journey, that she is she's self-proclaimed that she doesn't really have empathy and doesn't really have she's selfish and can't really relate to other people. And I think a lot of people are that way, but they just won't admit it. So admitting it and wanting to take the steps to be a better person is a really big deal, and to be so open about it as opposed to just look at me, I did all this work and now I'm here. It's no, this is where I started from, this is where I ended up. I still have quite a ways to go, but I'm going to take you on my journey. And just because she also recognizes she can't turn on her TV, and she has 2 assistants on call all the time, and she can't do that shit for herself. But that's not normal, and at least she knows that, and she got where she was out of her own sheer natured will. And it's not she had a rich family who paid for her entire life and to get there. So I just admire her. It's a well-written book. It's a little bit deeper from somebody who is known for being light and funny, but also just gives you a fun, I love to say that everything's fun. It gives you a nuanced look into somebody who kind of just may appear as a one-dimensional person if you don't know a ton about her, If you've read all of her books, you'll definitely enjoy this. If this is your first foray into the Chelsea Handler books, she's come a long way since the first one, so this might even be the one to dive into if you haven't already. Okay. Next, we have, so I'm cheating a little bit on this episode. Normally, we just talk about 5 books. This week, I read so many books that I kind of had to combine 2, so there's really going to be 6, but I'm combining 2. They're 2 short story collections that are similar but different. So the first one is the first one is called The Hidden Girl and Other Stories by Ken Liu. So Ken Liu is an author I had never heard of. This is another one of those that I think I just saw kind of like recommended in a Goodreads or something article that came out. When did this come out? Like a little while ago, February. And I had a hold on it at the library and it finally came in this week. So that's why I read it. Like I said, it's a book of short stories. I believe there's like 17 or 18. This one's a little bit longer. It's over 400 pages. Even though each story is self-contained, quite a few of them do kind of have overlapping characters and overlapping threads. They're more of a sci-fi futuristic world while still having very grounded characters who could exist today, just in these situations and worlds that we can't personally fathom. They're almost, I guess Goodreads is saying there's a novelette in it, which is kind of like a novella, I guess, or a, under 100 pages. I don't know what the exact terminology is to be able to call it a novella versus a novel. But this is great for sci-fi lovers. This is great for people who kind of, Philip K. Dick sort of Black Mirror type, but with a little more humanity, not so much like a Twilight Zone darkness. I mean, there's that aspect to it, but like I said, it's more about the characters and the personal relationships existing with this outside world as opposed to the world existing with the characters. So that's one short story book, or book of short stories. And the other one that I really enjoyed is called And I Do Not Forgive You, Stories and Other Revenges by Amber Sparks. Okay, so first of all, how amazing is that title? And Other Revenges, immediately drawn into it. This is another one that I had a hold on for quite a little while, quite a few months at the library. It's a shorter one. It's at least half the length of The Hidden Girl. It's under 200 pages, so a very easy one-day read. Again, also a very easy way to get back into reading if you're I just can't simply read more than 5 pages a night. If you only want to read 5 or 10 pages a night, you could even bang out 2 short stories in this. It's not sci-fi. It's grounded in reality, but there's quite a few elements of fairy tales and magical realism to it. One thing that I was going to share is there was just an amazing first sentence for one of the stories that really grabbed me in. And so I was going to read it to you. Maybe we'll put it in the description, but I don't have access to it right now. It brought me back immediately to a time in 4th grade when we did this experiment where everyone was doing our free read. We all sat on the floor. The teacher said, okay, now I want people to volunteer and read me the first sentence of your book. And so I remember the one that I chose was from the Series of Unfortunate Events book that I was reading. Naturally, the sentence was 5 or 6 lines long. But having the kids, with myself, reading the variety of different first sentences, exposed the power of how it can draw you and how it can set the tone, how it cannot set the tone, just kind of ever since then. I've always sort of noted the first sentence of a book in that context, really thinking about it as opposed to just all right, I'm diving in. So some highlights from And I Do Not Forgive You. There's one where Zeus and his daughter, I think it's Athena in the story, it's sort of a video game type situation. She creates a video game for him and it's still the gods, but imagine they were in 2020. There's a really sort of relatable short story about the 2 friends who share a theater friend, and the way that this theater friend is such an actor and fits all those stereotypes and is so dramatic and brings all that to their lives while they still kind of remain on the periphery. Another one about a trailer park ghost and the girl who lives there and the ghost that haunts her. Another one that's here's my diary about the weird sounds that my neighbors upstairs are making, and maybe they're werewolves. So it's sort of magical realism, everyday women thrown into not everyday situations, tight and succinct, prosaic, but still flowing. to write a short story, I think, is almost sometimes harder than a novel. It's like what's left unsaid is more powerful, and really you want the bare bones, but you also, you want to provide some literariness to it. You don't want it just to be like, and then Sam went to the store and he picked up a box of donuts. It's like, I'm not going to give you another sentence, but this is a great, I'm still thinking about it. Each story, like, I would definitely, like, read it again, too. I feel like since everything was so short, I still took stuff from it, but I could easily, like, read it again, and definitely, like, it would feel like a different novel. I mean, a different book almost, because I would just get stuff out of it that I didn't get the first time. And it's so short that, like, you could reread it again. You could read it probably twice in one day if you had serious motivation. I mean, it's a little bit extreme, but it's it's like watching a movie again that now that you know the ending, you're like, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at this now that I, like, understand her style, now that I know what she's going for, and I can take something different out of it because each one is so short, but still filled with wonderful meanings and things to explore. Yep, so that's that one. The next one we have is called Beauty by Christina Chiu. This is about one woman. It's a fiction. It's a novel. It's one woman, Amy, we meet her when she's a young child. Her father has just left her, and her mother and her sister. And the novel takes us through that moment all the way through her life, her first marriage, having her son with him. She's then in another marriage. Her son has some behavioral problems, so there's the issue of motherhood and being able to connect with him while, resenting him and his problems while still feeling that insane motherly bond, contrasted with the relationship she has with her second husband's son, who is, quote unquote, more normal. Her wanting to feel like, his mother and his primary guardian because there's so many issues with his father. Through all that is the issue, as the title states, sort of the issue of beauty, but through that sort of a woman's role in society, as she meets her first husband, who is a fashion designer. They meet, that's sort of her dream for herself, and that permeates the entire novel, is that dream having been lost and forgotten because of motherhood, but still constantly being a part of her life, and how she finds her way back to there, the different ideals of beauty, and how her physical appearance changes throughout the year. It's a portrait of a woman and her life, since she wants to be a fashion designer and an artist. That component of it contrasted with her role as a mother, her role as a woman, as a wife, is all just really well written. It paints, it sounds like a story that has been told time and time again, but Amy Wong is definitely a very deep, three-dimensional character who I would love to spend time with. A woman who is open with her flaws and thoughts and dreams in a way that's very, like, I'm not a mother, I don't have children, but I can totally relate to it in terms of just juggling so many different senses of self and identity in the world. The publisher is 2040 Books, and it actually won the book award from that, which just shows you how freaking good it is. I believe right now it's only 99 cents on the Kindle store. I think when I got it, it was only a few dollars. So this one might be worth it to get the digital copy because it's so much more inexpensive. And it's a great read just for anybody who is feeling a little bit stuck in their sense of identity, who wants to take a break and get into the mind of somebody else. And, written in that sort of like Catcher in the Rye, Holt and Caulfield, Great Gatsby, what's his name? Nick, like, it's just like, it's an iconic character almost that Amy Wong, I hope, becomes an iconic character that people look back on and say, this is a fascinating individual study, and let's analyze all these quotes, and let's write a book report and all that, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. And the last book that we have today is called Want by Lynn Steger Strong. So Want has a beautiful sort of like rainbowy watercolor cover, which I feel is kind of the trend lately. I mean, there's always that sort of like summer bright colors, but especially lately, I mean, I'm personally a fan of the whole tie-dye trend. I have been even before it like became a trend. So immediately, like, I did have a hold and I found this online, but it's the sort of cover that just like draws you into it. And you're like, oh, I want that. Like all those different colors and the reds and the blues and the way they all flow together. This is another portrait of an individual character study of a woman who, like the title said, just like wants more out of her life. She's unsatisfied. She's tired. She has 2 kids. She is living beyond her means. She's just trying to juggle her life. It also, so as she's struggling with her relationship as a mother, she's also struggling with her relationship to her former best friend, Sasha. Sasha is we pretty much get to know her and meet her through flashbacks to their to their college experience, which is where they became super close, and then how Elizabeth, the main character's friendship with Sasha, has shifted and evolved, and how friendships can look so different from each side, how a friendship, and one in particular, can sustain our own sense of self and our own relationships with others. There's also just a lot of everyday struggles, not so much as targeted, like Elizabeth is not an aspiring fashion director. I think that aspect of beauty and image is explored more in Beauty, but this one explores more of just like an existential longing and yearning. It's not necessarily fun, but it's also not necessarily dark. It's kind of like a Mrs. Fletcher type Tom Perrotta novel. Goodreads says, in Want, Strong explores the subtle violences enacted on a certain type of woman who dares to want things. So I guess the theme of this episode is kind of, like women wanting things, women wanting to be themselves, show off their identities. They've been told they're too much, and there's, why? Why is it a problem if a woman's too much and not a man's too much? Maybe we'll turn this into an academic lecture, and that'll be everything fun. So that is it for this week. I hope you all are doing wonderful. I hope you're reading. As also, you can also be watching TV, listening to podcasts, but mostly reading. I hope you check out one of these 5/bonus 6 books. Please comment below. Let me know what you're reading. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube for the videos. Make sure you're subscribed on iTunes or Spotify so you can get our audio files. Make sure you're subscribed on Instagram, on Goodreads, where you can keep up with what I'm reading on a sort of daily basis. I think that's everything, and until then, stay reading.